let everybody in.
Is she like a keynote or is she?
She's a keynote.
Oh, Ginger, they're playing your happy song on my conference. Playing the happy song. That's a nice thing about it. I'm on the conference for the diversity and they're playing the happy dance. That's how they're starting off the conference.
Jason, just bring an art partnership and support our initiatives.
Would you like to say something?
Food's ready.
All right, Cindy, you are up.
All right, let's see if I can do this screen share. There we go. Welcome, everyone. I am Cindy Ellenberg, President of 33rd District PTA, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to the 33rd District PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. The last event the 33rd District held in person before this crazy pandemic caused all of us to stay at home was last year's DEI conference. So much has happened in the last year. The world has literally been turned upside down. Through it all, PTA endures, even without students and parents on campus holding in-person events and programs. PTA still is there to support our students and their families. PTA supports all families. As PTA, we must work hard to be inclusive, to be welcoming to all. Through the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion committees throughout 33rd District, we must take advantage of every opportunity to educate ourselves on ways to bring equity, diversity, and inclusion to our PTAs, our schools, and our communities. One opportunity in this journey is this conference. We appreciate you taking some of your valuable time to attend. Okay. For the conference tonight, Spanish interpretation is available. If you wish to participate in Spanish, please click on the globe interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. You should be able to hear Claudia, our Spanish interpreter. Can you hear the interpreter? Please type yes or no in the chat. Thank you. To begin our conference, we would like you to take a short 3-question anonymous poll to help us understand the demographics of our attendees. You will have about 5 minutes. Please scroll down to answer all 3 questions and don't forget to hit submit. Thank you.
The only reason we didn't do that though is because we were trying to get it out to you. So like I know.
Okay, about 1 more minute. And then we'll start the program.
Hopefully everybody can see the poll on their screen. We really want to know who's in the room. So please click on answering the first question, scroll down to the second and then the third, just so that we know who's here. Thank you so much.
Hello, am I being heard? Hello?
You can, yes, 1 second. Cindy, you want to stop in the poll and then show the results?
Sure. Okay.
So just so that we see who's in the room, we have a lot of parents, members of PTAs, we have a few educators, some administrators. We also have some demographic information about who's here. And the third question, we've got all different levels of school age folks here as well, preschool, a lot of elementary folks here, some middle school, some high school, and multi-age groups. Great, so I think this is really good information for our speaker to know as we're diving in. Okay, someone had a question.
Kim, I'm sorry. This is Maricela de Rivera. I apologize for interrupting. A friend of mine registered and
Yes.
she is not able to get in because it's at capacity. Is that correct?
Yes, that is something we just learned. And so you can direct them to the Facebook Live. We are live on Facebook right now.
Thank you for letting me know, Kim. And is that from the Long Beach PTA?
It's from
the
33rd District PTA.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that.
Arthea or somebody, can we please put the Facebook's on the chat box?
Yep, we're putting it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. It is my pleasure to introduce the chair of both the 33rd District PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference Committee and the Long Beach Council PTA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Sarah Derrick.
Thanks, Cindy. Sorry, my video is not going to be on tonight because I have a guy working in the other room. So here I am. I'm Sarah Derrick, and I'm going to tell you how the Long Beach Council PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee came to be. Almost exactly a year ago, we were sitting at this very conference listening to Anna King speak and being inspired. And I kept thinking, somebody should really put this committee together to work on this in our district. Just a few weeks later, sitting at home during the pandemic and really seeing the inequity of it all, I made a motion to our council to start a DEI committee. Our committee is filled with people who do this work as their profession at their own schools and all around our community. The work these women have done in less than a year is positively astounding, especially our committee guide, which I'll be sending out to all of you this weekend. I'm glad you all get to know them a little bit this evening. And now I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Molly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Bennett. I hope you can all hear me. I'm a parent in Long Beach Unified. I have a 9th grader. I really enjoy facilitating workshops with my committee members at our schools. I'm helping PTAs develop their own committees and also helping out with our social media, which is a big job in and of itself. I want to take you through our agenda for the night really quickly, if we could get that slide up. Thank you. So we're in our welcome time right now. Then we're going to have a land acknowledgement. We're going to overview our DEI committee, who we are, and our mission statement. We're going to have our wonderful guest speaker, and we will then return, we'll then go into breakout rooms, where we will answer a few questions. We will come back and we will give you some really great action steps based on our speaker, based on our breakout rooms, and then we will have our closing. So before we go to the land acknowledgement, I just wanted to get us all centered here together. We're so appreciative that you are all here. If you could maybe close your eyes if you feel like it, get your feet grounded on the floor. Start to pay attention to your breath, just easy breaths in and out. As you're doing that, maybe think of setting an intention for tonight with one word. My word for tonight is going to be connection. And as you're breathing in and out, just kind of saying that word to yourself a couple of times, whatever your intention is for tonight. Breathing in and breathing out. You're welcome to keep your eyes closed as I read our land acknowledgement. Next slide. We want to acknowledge that the land we all reside on was taken. Here in Long Beach, we're on the homeland of the Tongva people. As we recognize this history, we must also grapple with what it means to live on stolen land, understand our role and responsibilities, and be committed to supporting the struggle for Native nation sovereignty and self-determination. We continue to pay our respects to the caretakers of the land, the Tongva Nation, their ancestors, elders, and relations past, present, and forthcoming. If you know what land you are currently occupying, we would love for you to put it in the chat box. Great, we can go to next slide. So our committee is made up of 12 members. What we do is we raise awareness around anti-Blackness, we interrupt structural racism, we celebrate history, culture, and excellence of marginalized groups. We operate through the PTA on each campus, and we're here to promote an enriching and supportive climate with a racial, gender, and social justice lens. And our committee's mission statement. The mission of the LBC PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is to promote an enriching and supporting climate with a racial, gender, and social equity lens that allows all members of the Long Beach Unified School District community to thrive and to succeed. So now I'm going to pass it on to my fellow community member, Nushin.
Get out.
Oh, sorry, here's our contact info. Please take note of this. We'd love for you to follow us on all platforms. And there's our email there down at the bottom. We're always accessible for questions and any help that you might need. Take it away, Noosh.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. I do want to also mention that the session is being recorded. So if anybody is not comfortable with that, we completely understand. You can feel free to stop your video. And that being said, before we really get into a few things that I'm going to talk about, which is equity and versus equality, diversity, etc., is I would love to have a photo. So this would be an opportunity where if you're not comfortable, go ahead and stop your video. But if you are, I'm going to put in gallery view. I'm going to count to 3 and do a screenshot of us all together, just so that we have that, because you really could have been anywhere and you chose to be here with us in the evening during, dinner time and whatever else you have going on, hangout time, whatever it is. So I really want to, honor your time and appreciate that you're here and just remember this moment. So thank you for that. I'm going to just put this in gallery view. If anybody's wondering what the hack is at least on a iMac, you do Command Shift and the number 3 and it does a screenshot. So I have us all here and I'm going to count to 3. So on 3, you can smile and just look in that little circle where the video is, because I always look in the screen directly and I look like I'm looking down. So on the count of 3, smile. 1, 2, 3. Yay, it's so beautiful. So you have all of our social media, so please do follow us and you'll see who made it in, because it's a pretty big group. I also want to add that if you have anybody who who is unable to get into the meeting, sometimes that happens we did upgrade, but sometimes when you get the link and we don't upgrade in time, I'm just going to blame Zoom for all of that. So please direct them to Facebook. If someone could put that link again in case anyone recently has joined, because I did admit one more person, please put that, go to that link on Facebook and direct folks there. If you're on Facebook Live watching us, we do have Nanette and a few others who are going to be monitoring the Facebook comments. So don't feel like you're only there as observers. Please feel free to comment and listen in and share whatever you have on your mind as we're watching, as we're going through this work. And we'll have somebody able to share out some of the comments and we'll be saving that as well. Okay, so Kim, please do bring this back up. Just a quick background about myself. I am an equity, diversity, inclusion consultant. My doctorate is in education with centering race and gender equity in education. So I create curriculum and teach educators throughout Southern California, actually throughout the country, and mainly for USC's Race and Equity Center and also for UCLA. So some of the slides I'm going to go through are coming directly from USC's Center for Urban Education. So the next slide. So here we are. I'm going to speak at a slower pace just because of our closed captioning, and to make sure that I'm getting through everything in a concise manner. So equality imagines an equal world. On the left, you'll see an image that shows equality. This is what most people, I would imagine, we care about all students equally. So here's an image of the ladder and 3 groups who are climbing up that ladder at that same place. So equality imagines an equal world.
Everything is equal.
I'm sorry? Hello? Oh.
Sorry, that was my mistake. You're muted. Can you unmute? There you go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, how long was I muted?
Just for a minute. I went to mute myself and I muted you by mistake. My apologies. Keep going.
Okay. Did we go through the left slide? Equality imagines an equal world?
Yep.
Okay, good. So then on the right, but the world isn't equal. So really we have everybody still has a ladder to go up. Nothing, we're not saying diplomas are just handed to people, but there are there's inequalities that exist, especially in our education systems, poorly funded schools, less skilled teachers, counselor ratios that are extreme, truncated curriculum. And so meanwhile, we have some folks who still have a ladder to go up, but perhaps there are scholarships, they have parents who are both educated. Many of us are those parents as well. Some also have some SAT and ACT tutors, middle upper class. Perhaps they're able to take honors courses and AP credits at their schools, whereas some schools don't even offer those, and having active social networks and social capital. And again, this is all from the Center for Urban Education at the University of Southern California. Go Trojans. Okay, next slide. So, and on the left, it has bias and systemic racism. So again, we see there is a ladder that predominantly white folks do have to climb up. However, many of the obstacles, such as microaggressions, implicit bias, disproportionate remediation, meaning a lot of predominantly marginalized groups or English language learners are disproportionately and inaccurately placed into special education curriculum when they didn't necessarily belong there either, or they don't have anyone advocating for them through their school to help them progress at the same rates as others. So again, bias and systemic racism on the left, and then on the right, within the same picture, a diversity lens, which many tend to focus on just diversity and inclusion. However, diversity and inclusion without equity mindedness is just transactional and not actually transformational. So when we're talking about just diversity, we need diversity. We're really, when we have an unequal system, specifically an educational system, but also health and social systems, we are actually bringing just more people on the surface into this inequitable system. And then finally, so in contrast, equity redirects resources to the pathways with the greatest need to fix barriers and intentionally provide support. Meaning, rather than blaming our students and their families for the fact that there are inequities, we're actually trying to take some responsibility as those with privilege, or as those with who are able to speak with policymakers, trustees, and the administrators at school districts to actually take some accountability and help redirect those resources. So for example, data disaggregation and analysis, but not just looking at things just through race, but even through intersectional components like race and disability, et cetera, race and gender and income, for example. Setting some goals and action planning, faculty and staff training to be equity facilitators. So while many here might not be able to be the facilitators, you can push and advocate for there to be trainings at your schools. And then also inquiry to understand how the practice will impede equity. What we're looking for is to just have equity mindedness, and the idea of equity being beyond just one time thing, but actually a normalized practice in everything we do in our systems. So yes, and Sarah has just mentioned this part of our committee guide. This is part of our guide, and it will be sent out to everyone who registered. Yes, and we also have an awesome glossary in our guide as well to help with a lot of different terms, some that we've mentioned here and some that we won't get to necessarily discuss in depth with that are on there as well. Thank you, Anna. Yes, intersectional framework is absolutely essential. Thank you. Okay, so that said, I think the next step is to really introduce our phenomenal speaker. I'm really excited to share about this person, Farzana Nayani. So let me actually read off a little bit about her. So her pronouns are she, her, hers. She's a recognized diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, coach, and international keynote speaker. She has worked with Fortune 500 corporations, public agencies, higher ed institutions, school districts, and much more. She herself is a multi-ethnic Filipina and Pakistani background and is a passionate advocate for the multiracial community. She's the parent of 2 active and loving sons, and her new book, Raising Multicultural Children, Tools for Nurturing Identity in a Racialized World, which I have here, which I've been reading through, which is great, given that I also have multicultural children. It's been distributed by Penguin Random House and is widely available through Amazon, Target, Walmart. It's available through ebooks and audiobooks, but also if you're able to support your local bookstores and encourage them to carry the book, that would be great as well. So without going on and on about Farzana, I will let her speak for herself. Thank you so much for being here with us, and welcome.
You're muted, Farzana.
Hi there. Welcome. It's so great to see everyone here today, and thank you so much for that generous introduction, Nosheen. Again, my name is Farzana Nayani. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. We have a full house and a lot to cover. And I'll go ahead and get started with sharing my screen. So just to direct you to the screen here, our session today is looking at viewing our schools through a DEI lens. And what's important here is to acknowledge our roles in our school districts as family members, as parents, as caregivers, and also as educators of our children. And even if you don't have a formal role as an educator, you are an educator because you're creating and cultivating opportunities for education in children's lives. And just want to acknowledge all of that and all of you here today. Continuing with that, I want to thank the 33rd District PTA for having me here today and also for holding space for this conversation. It is so, so important, and it goes beyond one event. And I'm seeing all the great work that you're doing and also the resources that you're sharing. In addition to that, I want to honor everyone here today who's coming here and taking time off from caregiving their children and being with their families. I have a couple of close friends who are on here today, and you know, it's meaningful to see everyone gather. As was mentioned, with my background as a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist and coach and author of my book, it's really grounded in a lot of the experiences I've had, not only through lived experience, but also through working with families as a board member of a local organization that serves race and multiracial families, and also as a contributor to the Smithsonian curriculum. I've just seen a lot of different things that could come into play in our conversation today. I am a parent myself. I am a mother, and you can see my two sons here, and I am based in the South Bay area as well. So as we continue, I'll be drawing from examples of those experiences that I've had, and also from all the many families that I've been able to come into contact through my work. So let's begin with a reflection, and if you're able to use the chat, go ahead and share, why are you here today? And in addition to that, what impact you wish to make at your school? So the issues that we are going to talk about here today are grounded in your own experience and what you're involved with. And so we want to make sure that we connect to that. So go ahead and share. And as you're thinking about that, we can even expand that out into what impact you'd like to make in the community and also the world. We are currently in a pandemic and are, continuing to uplift the voices around racial justice and the movement for Black lives, as well as so many other important issues. And the framing of all of that is that we are maybe one person in the community, but can affect great change. So go ahead and continue sharing, and I invite you to look at what other people have reflected on and have brought into the space in terms of what you wish to gain from this discussion today. And we can see some of the comments coming in terms of, really making an impact and looking at how to support your school district and community, how you can get involved with your own child's school, and also
looking at how, Facebook, so I could have been watching from Facebook. Oh well.
Looking at how we are also acknowledging our own identities, and I'm so glad that some of that is coming through in the chat, because that is essentially the basis of my work, is looking at who we are and how we fit into the systems and structures that create inequitable or equitable environments, and how we can drive that through educational practices. So I will continue, but I encourage you to continue looking at those comments, which are so rich and deep, and bringing awareness to the space of who is here. So today's session is viewing our schools through a DEI lens. As Nosheen talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that plays into our work and our educational systems, the vision here really is looking at how to create an inclusive and equitable school community committed to access and achieving the full potential for all. And that doesn't mean if we treat everyone the same, that the same outcomes will come to be. As we saw earlier, it is important to not only drive home the idea that we have to dismantle systems and processes, as well as actions and interactions that create inequity, as well as a lack of inclusion. And the key here is not the intention. You know, sometimes we say to ourselves, well, I didn't mean that, or we're trying. And the push really here today is to be a catalyst for us all to take charge of the fact that we need to create impact. This impact is overdue. What we're looking for in outcomes is affecting our children at astronomical rates. The compounding of what they're experiencing and the gaps that are being created as a result of these systems still continuing here in 2021 is something we need to acknowledge. So the impact is cultivating a sense of belonging, not just inclusion, but belonging. And let that sink in. What does belonging mean to you? What does true belonging feel for our children? And especially uplifting historically and currently marginalized communities and identities. As we continue to see the outcomes of the social and economic statuses of the families that we serve, and how that can impact what children and families can be involved with, as well as social and emotional learning, as well as the other aspects of what we tend to measure in schools. We have to expand that out and not put the focus on the individual as if they're completely responsible for this outcome. We as a community can come together and also take hold of the fact that we are as responsible for the community as we are for our own individual children. And that's where we need to get to. We need to get to the point where this view of education and community is bringing together the idea of it taking a village. It takes all of us together jointly to be able to create this outcome. And allow me to get into the why. So why should we address DEI? I often get asked this, and less so now with the global awareness of racial equity and the need for racial justice, as well as other aspects of inclusion. But why? And the reason is this: the compounding impacts of mental health issues are affecting our children. We're seeing higher suicide rates among youth these days. We're seeing the pressure to perform with children not being able to cope. We're seeing the widening gap of access to adequate education and resources continue. And this is compounding also due to the identities of the children who are in these different groups. We also want to, on a positive note, cultivate belonging and community. And that is something that is within arm's reach. We would like to think about how to create a sense of, a school community that is inclusive. And ultimately, what this can also affect is performance in terms of academic performance, in terms of, us being able to serve the children in a way that is culturally responsive. And the result of that is a trajectory of our children being one where they can reach their fullest potential. That trajectory starts at a young age. And I will tell you that in the work that I do in corporate education, as well as working with adults in nonprofit higher education institutions, let me tell you that I would like to rewind time and start with these individuals when they were children. This is the time when we can make an impact for lifelong, a sense of being able to connect with others. It is now, it was when our children are young that they form a sense of connection to other people, or they form biases. It is now, it is at this moment that we are able to be in control of in the environments that we are connected to them in. So I encourage us to take the mantle here and really think about how we can build a community. And, you know, there's a lot of why we shouldn't out there. There's a lot of resistance, and the barriers to addressing DEI are that it's uncomfortable. It might offend people, and maybe we don't know where to start, or perhaps we feel it could cause more issues. These reasons exist, but they cannot be a barrier to us now that we are aware of the need and in our consciousness of the greater good. So we have to be able to overcome these barriers, overcome this sense of discomfort, and realize that people from marginalized groups do not have the choice to ignore this. They don't have the choice to look the other way and decide not to be uncomfortable, because as a woman of color, I'm put in uncomfortable situations all the time. I don't have a choice to look away. So those of us who are in charge of a situation where we can look away because we have privilege, I urge us to look at where that discomfort is coming from and recenter ourselves to look at who is being harmed in the situation or who is in a place where they don't have power or voice to do anything. Okay, and I hope this is making sense, that we have to put aside this idea that you know, where we sit in our discomfort is more important, right, than serving the children and serving our school communities. And note your identity in this. So if you have privilege and where you experience marginalization, those things can coexist at the same time. And again, I encourage us to utilize our ability for our platform, our voice, and our action to make a difference, either as allies or as accomplices in this, and to continue the work. I also want to bring up a study that is phenomenal in expressing this point. It was created by the Sesame Workshop and the University of Chicago. It's quoted in my book. And this was published by the NPR. So when families were asked if they talk about differences in social identities, this is everything including race, ethnicity, gender, religious background, and so on. The research showed that more parents of color talk to their children about race and ethnicity than did white parents. The survey also showed that many of the parents who are talking not just about race and ethnicity, but gender, class, and religion are doing so because children are hearing negative comments. So what this means is that most parents do not bring up the topics of identity, race, and difference unless there's an issue. And that means that folks of color, BIPOC individuals, are more likely to bring it up because of an incident. The rest of the folks who don't have those incidents come to play generally don't actually bring this up. So think about that. Children will go through life without having a proactive conversation about difference until something comes into their sphere of awareness, whether it be a YouTube video or a funny meme that they reshare on social media without any cognizance of the impact of that. We're seeing a lot of that right now with the anti-Asian racism that's happening in response to the coronavirus and people calling it the Chinese virus. This is a direct result of not having conscious conversations about these issues and that being permitted to continue as it's funny. So the call to action is to start to have conversations about these things, even though we may not know where to start. And you can do that at the dinner table. You can do that with your children in any moment. In addition to whether or not we're ready, one way to start to have an awareness of yourself is to do an assessment and start to reflect on deep questions. And I've created something called the Racial Dialogue Readiness Questionnaire. It's in my book, and you can actually go through this questionnaire and start to ask yourself if you're resolved with talking about race and how objective you are and what your lived experience is. And what I've done to make it easy for everyone and accessible is I've created a free handout for you. So all you have to do is go to my website. I put it in the chat, and you just sign up for my newsletter and you'll get this handout for free. You can use it with your school community. You can bring it to your PTA and have a conversation with parents. You can also use it as professional development for your teachers. So I encourage you to do that. A fun other way to do it is to take it home and try it with your partner and see if you land the same way, because that's the other thing. Sometimes we're ready to talk about it, but our partner isn't. And I encourage us all to take that home and try it out with different family members. So that is a resource for you as well. Another thing I wanted to bring up is the context of the current state that we're in. We are still in the need to recognize and honor and uphold racial justice. And this is a picture from Portland where the moms came out in full effect. They came out and you could see them here arm in arm, and the dads came out too, by the way, with the leaf blowers. I don't know if you saw all of this, but the thing that they came to be was about when the tragic murder of George Floyd happened and he called out to his mother. It motivated people in a way that we have not seen. That calling of parenting, that calling of caring for our children reached these people in a way that it was like, not on my watch. That could have been my child. This is the energy we need to bring to this work. This dynamic momentum needs to continue, even when we're tired or even when we don't know what to do. This needs to keep continuing for all aspects of identity, for ability, for language access, for an awareness of neurodiversity, everything, okay? So when you are feeling like you don't have it in you, remember these moms, remember these parents, and remember these folks who are doing it not only for their own children, but for the greater community. To close this off, to look at the DEI lenses that we can bring at home, I have a few tips, and these are 3 C's that you can start to cultivate conversation around at home. So the first thing is communication, being open about incidents that happen. I talk to my kids all the time, and sometimes it, might be TMI, but they know exactly what's going on. They hear all my calls, and they know how I feel about things. And sometimes we just need to be open about, look, I don't understand, how this can continue in the news, and I'm feeling down today, or this is confusing me. That communication shows vulnerability and curiosity and actually models that interest to them. You don't have to have the answers. It's like learning about anything, space, sex, let's learn together, let's figure it out. But I want to acknowledge that this is in the room. Contact, introducing your child to positive conceptions of different identities, especially those who are underrepresented. There's so much literature now being published by diverse authors and also by companies who are displaying brands, including people in wheelchairs, and also a number of different other aspects of diversity. And this is so important for us to have contact, and it's shown to reduce the sense of bias that can occur in children. Consciousness, explaining the why behind this to your children so they can develop an internal sense of equity and inclusion, and the why. As we round out looking at this in the school setting, I recommend 3 ways of combating inequity in schools and also supporting a DEI approach. And these are another set of 3 C's. So the first is through curriculum, being really conscious and ensuring that curriculum and materials are inclusive and advocate ideas of identity, equity, and inclusion and justice. Secondly, it's through classroom interactions and making sure that we are mindful and inclusive and culturally sensitive, and cultivate belonging, equity, and access amongst individuals who we work with and the students we serve. And then combating bias, so bringing awareness and action to address bias as it occurs at both an individual and systemic level. So these are, kind of the jumping off points, and I know we're going to move into breakouts. But so the next steps here are to keep having the conversation. You have a lot of resources. I've checked out the National PTA. There are a lot of amazing resources. Your local PTAs have such amazing resources, and in yourselves you do as well. So keep having the conversation at your PTA. at school, at home, with your partner, and with your children. Involve them in this process. And, think about what barriers you are facing to address these key issues and how to ultimately uplift and support underrepresented and marginalized communities. Want to thank you for coming today. We'll have a chance to interact some more, but please do stay in touch. You can follow me on my social media. I have 2 pages, my personal page, which is my name, and then I have a page called Multiracial Matters, which is issues that matter to the multiracial community. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And thank you all for being here today. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be in conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can stop your share screen so we can see everybody again. Great. So I'm just going to put the gallery view. Thanks. Oh, wow. That was, how are y'all feeling in the chat? Let's hear how you're feeling out there. Give us some words. I see folks on Facebook are feeling things. They're saying it's fantastic. How are we feeling in the chat, in the room? Great. So we urge you to just, well, first of all, let me ask if there are any questions, if folks have any questions before we move to the next thing. If folks have any burning questions right now. It was a lot. I know you're ruminating on a lot. By the way, I'm Kim. I'm part of the DEI committee. So we're going to go into breakout rooms just for a few minutes, maybe 5 to 8 minutes. I urge you to just talk to one another about what resonated, how is diversity celebrated at your school, perhaps what are some issues you see.
A lo mejor si tienen algún problema, algunas preguntas. Voy a poner eso en el chat. O solamente pueden hablar. Quien sea que esté en el grupo pueden ver 5 o 6 personas en el grupo. No tengan miedo.
In your small group, right? But we want to model really good communication skills. And I think that our kids are looking to us to model lots of different things. And this is a real opportunity for us to lean into some of this hard conversation. And it's easy to do with strangers, by the way. So you're going to go into a room with a bunch of people you never knew and talk about just what resonated and what questions you have. So I'm going to open up the rooms, like I said, about 5 to 8 minutes. Click on join the room and I'll see you in a bit. I'll stay to help out. So for the folks on Facebook Live, we're gonna continue the conversation here in just a minute as everyone's going to their rooms. Sometimes people have stepped away, so they're not quite hitting the join button. All right, looks like most of the folks are in their spaces. So I will bring up Diana, and I will also bring up, where'd you go? Help me out, Cindy, I can't find, oh, there you are. I will bring you up to add you to the spotlight. And so hopefully the folks are in rooms talking about, but first of all, thank you. That was amazing. I'm gonna add myself to the spotlight here. So folks, okay. So that was super, super, super amazing. It was a lot of information. I really liked your 3 C's. I really liked, just a lot of great recommendations and offerings. I don't want to say advice because I'm sure you're like, I'm not giving you advice. These are just, suggestions and offerings, right? So I don't know, I'll let Diana just introduce herself to everybody because this is the first time you're front and center for folks. So you want to say hello to the people?
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Farzana, for the wonderful presentation. I was paying attention to the chat a little bit here and there and saw that there were so many positive responses and people are so encouraged and willing to take this forward and seeing what we can do. And I think that's the whole point of creating this space and also these committees for DEI with our PTAs at our schools, because people want to do something about it. And I think it's wonderful that we have you as, you know, an expert in this area. We are fortunate in Long Beach because we have several experts on our committee. So we have a lot of support in moving forward, and the kids just benefit from that. And I think as a PTA member, that's why we're in PTA, because we want all kids to benefit. And so how can we best serve the kids? How can we best serve our community?
So how do you, Diana, how do you see yourself in this conversation around diversity and inclusion? What's your own positionality?
Well, I'm going to get personal for a second, but I see myself as having an advantage because my father is Mexican and he's a first generation American. We were very close, and he talked to me a lot about his experience growing up. And it just so happened that he, you know, was, well, he grew up in poverty. He didn't have a lot. And in fact, a lot of times he didn't have the basics like shoes. So he always shared that with me. And I saw the pain that that caused him. And what that did for me was it led me to be more involved. PTA was a great way for me to put my energy into something, and it created a more understanding nature within myself and more compassion. I've been with Long Beach Council PTA for a long time because we oversee all the PTAs in the school district, and for me that's wonderful because it's not just one community or one part of town, but it's all across communities and it's across all kinds of borders. And I feel like the advantage was knowing about my father's, his experience. And even though that was different than mine, that was always in my heart. He always shared that with me.
Yeah. So I know there was a little bit of controversy a couple of months ago when folks just assumed that you were white just based on the way you look and not knowing that you are in fact biracial. And I think that's an assumption that a lot of people make just looking at people, right? So I wanted to ask Farzana, how have you impacted other parents, maybe even teachers, et cetera, as an educator or expert in this field? And has there been pushback even?
What's the first thing that I've noticed is that we have to start where people are at and where they're comfortable and then move from there. And what I've been doing with working directly with school districts is helping to crack open that conversation about where we are uncomfortable and to push, right? To push us further. And part of that is understanding that there are little things that we can do to easily cultivate inclusion and equity, whether it be having multicultural crayons in the classroom so kids can see their own skin color in the tools that they use, or even in using a range of pronouns. So those things, although can be, very specific, can have huge impact. And some of these things haven't been talked about in schools. So when I present, sometimes it starts to surface conversations around, well, where's the budget for supplies if I'm getting these things? And then that creates a ripple effect of questions around the system and the structures that we're in. So that's the kind of impact that is the key. It's the catalyst conversation like we're having now to start the ball rolling. And I believe that PTAs be the drivers of that. As a parent myself, who is a member of a PTA, I've seen the organizing that has been done around fundraising, around different other issues. So DEI can be also that.
Yeah, yeah. Whew. Taking all that in. I don't want to rush through this because it's all so critical, you know. So Diane, I wanted to ask in terms of our school district here, and I'm sorry, I know we have a lot of school districts participating and watching us live, but what is our school district in particular doing? What are some of the initiatives they're doing in regards to equity? What are some of the proposals on the table, things they're currently doing, and so forth?
Right. Well, one of the things that we're currently doing as a school district is a equity policy committee, and our deputy superintendent has started that work. I think it was at the end of summer, maybe in the fall, and they are going to be meeting on a regular basis and bringing forward recommendations to the Board of Education on how we can better use an equity lens in what we do, in everything that we do. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another thing that we're doing is we have a relatively new superintendent, and she has instituted an excellence and equity initiative mapping plan. And so she has laid out a plan for different things like principal supervision and support, and equity leadership and talent development, and student voice engagement, that type of thing. And she's laid it all out with steps on how it's going to be implemented and a timeline on when she wants to have things done. And then with the Board of Education, we are now working with a national organization. It's the Council of Great City Schools on our board governance development. And we are going to be working towards an eye on equity and student outcomes in everything we do as a board. So in the future, you're going to see some changes as far as our meetings, the agenda, everything, because we're going to be taking a critical look at what we do and how we can improve. And all centered on what we're doing for the kids and students.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's really important for those systemic changes are really important. So we're not band-aiding over things. And so I know we have about a minute left. I wanted to ask Farzana, what are some ways that we as parents, right, our community members, can hold our districts or our teachers, even our principals? What are some ways that we can hold folks accountable to implementing these diversity changes, such as, you know, a diverse curriculum or, you know, things of that nature? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I truly believe that asking the questions will keep the conversation going. The more we're involved and you know, are interested and engaged and can support at the same time. So, you know, not putting someone's back up against the wall, but, you know, just asking and offering support is a big key here. We need to be looked at as partners in education and as support. And we are literally in the homes of children now, and families are involved in the school environment. So that barrier even is less so. So what can happen though is if there's any defensiveness, and I see a comment in the chat about if there are people who don't want to ruffle feathers, etc. There needs to be a consciousness about how this is an imperative, and it's not as hard as people think. There's, in the back of my book, I have lesson plans, I have a glossary, and I have standards from teaching tolerance around social justice, and they're normed to grade. So there are resources out there for free that you can use and be able to do this immediately.
Right, yeah. I almost feel in some ways that it's just as important for parents to be in that work as well. And even if you're just starting with your parents, teachers, to say, here's this curriculum I found online from this amazing expert in the field. Maybe you might want to look at this when you're planning your class for this year. I remember every year for Black History Month, I had a stack of Black History cards that I would give to a different teacher every year in my son's school and ask that she read a card every day so that the kids are exposed to more than Martin Luther King, right? We've got a plethora of Black leaders. And so it's just little things like that, I think, as parents, that we have to lean into this work. And I don't think it's going to be sort of an overnight thing, but it's going to take all of us. And I think that's the key, that folks are oftentimes pointing to teachers or pointing to the principal or pointing to the superintendent or pointing to the district, but it's got to be this collective collaboration for us to make a difference, because racism is not going away, right? I mean, it's baked into our society in such a way that we want.
PTA
Somebody's not
council
on
in
mute.
California has this sort of
Somebody's
nation.
interrupting us here. Let's see. Cindy, can you help me mute folks that are not in their room?
There we go.
Hopefully
that helps.
I will close the breakout rooms and bring everybody back in about 50 seconds. Everyone will come back in. Any last thoughts for the folks on Facebook Live? Because you all are talking to them right now.
Well, I just would like to say that there's so much to diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of how expansive this conversation can be. We need to do better around gender identity. We need to do better around linguistic inclusion. We need to do better, right, around ability and neurodiversity. And justice for one group means that we can start to create that for all. So it's going to affect everyone. It's not a zero-sum game where someone gets ahead here. No, everyone can invite the conversation and gain from this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all again. I will bring everybody back into the room.
We're back.
We're back. Yay.
I'm not.
Oops.
We were just in the middle of it.
Yes.
You had a 60-second warning. You missed that?
I didn't see it.
Hi, Michael. I didn't see you show up.
I've been here from the beginning.
Okay, y'all, we're live on Facebook. So I just want to give some space. Thank you all so much for being brave and for not hanging up and for showing up. I know that some rooms, some people left. There were like 3 people in your rooms. Some of the less brave folks left, or maybe they had to make dinner. I don't know. But thank you all so much for just staying and engaging in conversation. Would anybody like to share anything from their group? Might have been, an aha moment, or any questions you might want to ask Farzana before we wrap up with our action steps? You can come off mute. Go ahead.
Oh, in my group, go ahead. Okay,
No, go.
in my group, some of the participants wanted to see if Farzana had any suggestions when you're getting pushback from PTA members or from the school who are pretty comfortable with the status quo or not very cognizant that there is an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, you've got to utilize the tool of empathy. There's a reason that people feel a defensiveness. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of sources of trauma. There's a lot of polarization in our country and in the world. And we need to ease and bridge across differences. So finding out what the resistance is really the key, rather than bumping up against it and causing more conflict. In my experience, that doesn't work. So inviting and deepening that conversation and bridging is important. And at the same time, understanding that we need to uplift the marginalized folks that are not able to make decisions or have that voice, and recentering. Once we recenter, the decisions are easier. Thank you for that question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I have to second that. Building relationships with particularly the challenging folks is super important. Any other group want to ask anything or share something from your group? It doesn't have to be a question. Shayna?
Yes, my group was trying to figure out the connecting, how to really connect with parents and making it so that they don't feel out of place and always being able to keep them engaged. That's what we were talking in our group about, is the connection and making them not feel as though they were less than. So that's what they were trying to get suggestions, and if there is anything that you can suggest, it would be helpful. I gave them a little bit of mine, but is there anything else that you would suggest?
You know, there are things that we do and say that we don't realize are excluding people. So the time of day meetings are held can exclude people. Also having the daddy-daughter dances, or right, you know, sometimes people don't have the dynamic of parenting or caregiving that we label as the norm. And so rather than do that, we need to use different words. I have you know, some amazing teachers in the district that I'm in, and I noticed the words they use. They say scholars, or they say the adult at home. They don't say parent, or they don't say even caregiver. It could be somebody else that is around. So there are ways that the little indicators that we use, PTA, I mean, it's parent, right? But the point is that, you know, by reaching forward into understanding that there are differences there. We had a thing at a school that I was involved with, where they were talking about the Christmas party. And I had to say, can we not call it that? Can we call it the winter party? And it was really hard for that parent to get that feedback, because, you know, Christmas is in the malls and Santa's everywhere. But what about that child who's Jewish? Or what about that child who's Hindu? They're going to go home and not feel a sense of belonging. So our parents also have to hold each other accountable to expand that, even though it's a norm, and push and say, look, who's being left out when we do and say things a certain way. I hope that's a good example.
Yeah, it's just making me feel as though I'm missing some of that myself, as far as the little words make a difference. And I'm feeling kind of guilty right now, but thank you.
Thank you for that vulnerability, Shayna. Anyone else? One last, is that Jolene?
Hi. So in our group, we talked a lot about just curriculum, and I don't have a specific question, but I'm trying to remember, it was Susanna. We talked about the pedagogical approach, and we talked about certain lessons and how to approach it with our kids, but also the privilege we have at home as individuals, that especially in the virtual setting, that we're able to address some of it if we disagree with it, right? So especially in terms of gender has been one thing, and
algunas cosas con las cuales no estamos de acuerdo. Y me acuerdo
my kindergartner first time in school was doing, and it said, who is the dad in this situation, was one of the questions. And my daughter was like, I don't know which one identifies as the dad, right? But that's coming from a very privileged position, and that I've been able to be at home with her, right? And then as Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, Black History Month, MLK, like all of these things have come up, and I am able to watch and present, but in that it seems very one perspective presented, right, and not multidimensional, and how we change that even at an early start. And I feel like we've been giving, like for me, right, as working at home with my child at home in kindergarten, given this privileged position to view that and also critique it. Otherwise, like if COVID wasn't a thing, I would have never seen that happening. But I think it's nice in that we can think about how to better address it to make it more accessible and also equitable for all students in the way that we think about the curriculum and the way that it's presented. And so that's kind of one of the aspects that we talked about in our group that is something that for my child that we've been talking about throughout the year, with this awareness of privilege at the same time, right? Like I get to work at home. Not all parents get to work at home and view this. So, but how we can make it so that it's more open for all students and not just addressed towards the white students and their histories.
That's very deep. Thank you. If I can respond, there's something in what you said that is here for everyone. And what it is perspective taking. So that critical thinking, the injection of a question at the end of a statement. Oh, we're celebrating Black History Month, but don't you think it should be all year? Or, oh, we're reading about history, but whose perspective is missing here? That's all you do. And what that does is it safeguards you. It doesn't mean that you have to inject your dogma on anybody, whatever it may be, but it opens up. Do you see it? It like cracks open the door for that child to understand that there's another way of thinking, that there could be someone else here, that there's somebody missing, there's someone's voice that hasn't been heard. That is the only thing that they need to be able to start the journey. And you can do that in that simple way of saying, actually, I think that there's something else here and I'm not sure what it is, or maybe you know. And that's how you can do it, but still respect the values and norms of that child's home or other parents. That critical thinking and perspective thinking is key. So I would say that in any curriculum, if that is in any lesson, you don't even have to construct a lesson around it. Just that modeling of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We could be here all night. This is so rich, but we're not going to be here all night. Don't worry. We've got another 10 to 15 minutes to talk about some action steps and then close out with our PTA, with our 33rd district folks closing us out. So hang in there for about 10 to 15 more minutes. Again, thank you for the conversation, for the vulnerability, for your open heart tonight, and just for listening and paying attention. So I want to pass it over to Arthi and Michelle to talk a little bit more about some concrete steps.
Use more of a DEI lens. And a couple of these are actually, to start, things you can do across all the grade levels. I think a very quick and easy tip you can implement tonight, tomorrow, is to start following us on social media and reposting us from your PTA communication sites. It's an easy way to start flooding your spaces with more DEI content. See us as part of your PTA comms team, your communications team that can find content for you and share it with you. Farzana touched on some of the things. I think it's a nice lead into some of what I was going to share. I think one of the things we're pushing for in Long Beach that some of our units have, and maybe some of you are seeing across the country, is pushing for a DEI chair on your PTA board. That is really critical because that person can bring a DEI lens to everything your PTA does. And when we talk about a DEI lens, and especially if you're at a place, I mean, I've seen this question around how do we make it feel like it's part of the culture, not a forced norm that we're pushing on people. I like to present it as, are we being as open in terms of who's at the table? What are we including? Who have we been missing? And it's not even about intention. I think it's unintentionally because we're coming from our own experience. We may not be realizing many of our special education parents don't feel welcome by our PTA. We don't mean to do that, but that's a clear example I've heard at my school where they don't feel welcome at the activities, roller skating night, figure skating night. If my child has physical differences, I don't feel welcome and I don't feel like you're thinking about me. And it's not intention, but I think we have to continue to ask those questions, and a DEI chair can help make the whole board start to have that lens. Some other ways are, think about the languages that are represented at your school and in that community. Are your PTA communications, the emails, the newsletters, the social media, are you presenting that at the actual meetings? Is that language being represented? Are you making accommodations to have someone there to do interpretation? Looking at your board and seeing, do we have a diverse representation here that not only reflects our school, because to be honest, our school could be primarily white or BIPOC, but representative of the world. And globally, are we bringing in a lot of folks across abilities, across race, gender, lots of different characteristics? Thinking about in your PTA communications, integrating more DEI. It could be in the events that you're sharing, in the articles or information or images that you're posting. Again, you can definitely repost our stuff. We're happy to help do that work for you. Some additional elementary, I think DEI is really, how are we widening that lens? A lot of times we're very narrow and it's just by habit. Are we looking at things like the arts programs at our school, the book fairs? Are we noticing that it's all white artists or authors, characters that we're uplifting? Are we looking at how we can bring more diversity and advocate for more diversity in that? Farzana brought this one up about inclusion when we think about the planning and the naming of events. The daddy, whether it's daddy daughter dance, we have dad's donuts, mom's muffins. How about you just do a donuts for grown-ups day and let that child be able to bring that grown-up that they want to bring to school to share that donut with. It doesn't take a donut away from the dad. It doesn't take a muffin away from the mom, but it lets that young person and that all families feel included. We all get to have donuts. I think that's a plus. And then Red Ribbon Day or Red Ribbon Week. I think we have some of these events during that week, Crazy Hair Day, Crazy Sock Day. I think we really need to think about the naming of these events. There's another way you could say Silly Sock Day, Fun Hair Day, Unique Day. And I think those are really, it's not just about a name change about, oh, you're sensitive. It's about really thinking about the words that we use. And, that's how are we supportive of folks that may, when we think about mental health, and also when we think about the images that we put up, and that we should not be depicting any kind of cultural natural hairstyle under this term of crazy hair. And we see that a lot at schools. And so I think those are some specific examples. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who has some examples at the secondary school level.
Good evening, everyone. So my suggestions will work both at the middle school level and also at the high school level. If you haven't already done so, I want to encourage you to embrace students on your executive board and on your standing committees. It can be an amazing experience to include students on your board. They give really valuable feedback about your events and your activities. And also they change the experience and the dynamic of your PTA in general. Also, I would encourage you, if you are having students, to change the name of your PTA to a parent-teacher-student association. That empowers the students to feel like they actually have a true say in the organization, and they do, because you're representing them and they see that they have a say-so. You definitely need to identify the affinity groups on your campus and reach out to them and find out what they want from the PTSA. If you don't know who they are, ask your administration, ask the student government on campus, ask your activities director, find out who's meeting. Is there a Latinx parent group? Is there an Asian American Family Association? Are there families of differing abilities meeting on campus? Is there a coalition of informed African American parents who meet once a week, once a month? Partner with the student and parent affinity groups to plan events and coordinate celebrations, and ask them, what do they see in terms of PTSA meetings, and are the meetings beneficial to them, and are they available to them in terms of, like Arthi was saying, are they represented on the board, and are they providing events and activities and times of days that are beneficial for the people in their groups? And also, Include brief reports from the adult affinity groups at your general membership meetings. So what I've seen done at some high schools is PTSA is very different in high school. There's lots of, in elementary school and middle school, PTA often provides a resource for everything that's happening on campus. Well, in high school, that kind of gets separated out by your sports, your involvement in performing arts, visual arts, whatever the kids are involved in. That's where the parents kind of get separated out with. So in many schools, PTA and PTSAs become a source for information or parent education. PTAs bring in a speaker that relates to high school parenting of high school age children. So many PTSAs bring in the administration, the counseling staff, and the ASB team to speak to parents because, let's face it, high school kids are not the best at communicating what's happening on campus to their parents. But parents want to speak to those people still, and that at a PTSA meeting, that draws in membership to come to the meetings. And why don't you have your adult affinity groups give a presentation there, what's happening at their meetings to your general membership? So that brings in awareness, like, hey, these groups are meeting on campus too, and they've got things going on, like they're having, an event, and I want to go to that event. And you're communicating with everybody, everybody's understanding more about each other. And, maybe it'll increase some more understanding, like we were saying, let's get to know each other a little bit better and let's branch out a little bit better. And maybe that'll enhance the whole experience for everyone. Also, in terms of those email blasts and communications, many of our schools have rich communication programs and language programs for the students. Some of them even teach, because many of our students speak so well already when they come in, they utilize translation and interpretation courses for the students. So utilize your students in those programs to translate your documents for you or to interpret at your meetings, and then give them service hours for doing so. You can also, to encourage a DEI lens, is to promote mental health, social services, and counseling services on school sites, rather than the traditional approach that's taken over on campuses for policing. And in California, there's a program called Californians for Justice Relationship-Centered Schools Programs. And that's something that many schools in Southern California have access to that you can become involved with. For those of you who are guests from around the country, you can check that out and see if there are programs that teach relationship-centered programs in schools. And they focus on having faculty and staff and students build relationships, and it changes the dynamic amongst the adults and the students on campus. And it just really helps integrate the whole social emotional dynamic for everyone. And it increases the positive response for all students and all adults on campus. So with that, I hope that you will look forward to receiving our guide. After this, everyone who registered for the meeting will be receiving the guide from the Long Beach Council PTA. And I'm going to hand it off to Sarah Mays-Derrick, one of the co-chairs of our committee, to give her perspective.
Hello again. If you cannot tell by my picture, I'm a 52-year-old white heterosexual married woman with 3 white sons. Why is this important? It's important because my life experience was extremely limited in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion until about 8 years ago, when I had an exceedingly intentional talk with myself about my biases and racism. Let me tell you what happened 8 years ago. One of my dearest friends' son decided he wanted to be and was a she. To be honest, it took me a beat as I was wholly unfamiliar with the transgender world. But what I did know was that I loved this child, and just the idea of anyone not treating her well or giving her the same opportunities she would have enjoyed as a white male made me angry. And that got me thinking about my Black, Latinx, gay, Jewish, and Asian friends. I truly don't know if I ever put myself in their shoes or even wondered about their experiences. And I felt awful. These are people I love. And if I wasn't doing it for them, I certainly wasn't doing right by my community at large. And that was the day I knew I had to do better and be better. In PTA and in other parts of my life, I would use my voice to speak up on behalf of unheard communities. I would constantly challenge my own stereotypical beliefs. I would talk to my sons about gender, sexuality, religions, misogyny, racism, and everything else. I would start a DEI committee, invite people outside of the traditional PTA box to become involved and share their vast knowledge. And I cannot mention our DEI committee without sharing it's been the single most rewarding work I've done in 18 years of PTA. So as a white woman, I am now speaking to all the white individuals in attendance. I challenge you all to talk to your kids about race, join or start a DEI committee, attend cultural events, add a DEI chair to your board, and have courageous conversations with yourself about implicit bias and racism. Thank you so much for coming to our event tonight. Back to you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your very intimate details of how you got involved in DEI. I so much appreciate your honesty. Thank you to Farzana and the Long Beach Council DEI Committee for sharing all of your hard work. I really appreciate all the efforts. And hopefully everyone can take some of this and move forward with their own experiences. Let me just share. Don't forget our 33rd District Spring Awards and Association meeting will be held on Thursday, April 22nd. All members of 33rd District PTA are welcome to attend and help us celebrate what has turned into a very interesting year. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you everyone for attending our DEI conference tonight. We hope you learned as much as I did. After the meeting, we'll be sending out a survey about your thoughts on this conference. Please take a minute or two to complete it. We really look forward to your input. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and good night.
Good night.
Mm-mm.
Thank you.